Maria Thompson stepped onto the shooting range just after sunrise. The sky was a soft orange and the air was still. She wore an old denim jacket, faded jeans, and a cap that looked like it had been washed 100 times. Her rifle case was scratched and worn, the zipper slightly crooked. She didn't walk like someone full of pride or nerves, just someone who had come to do what she needed to do. It was her first time ever entering a real competition. Everyone around her seemed to know each other. Some were joking loudly. Others were cleaning their shiny, expensive rifles on benches. Many of them wore colorful uniforms with sponsors' logos, matching caps and polished boots. Maria didn't have any of that. She looked more like someone who had just come to watch, or maybe had taken a wrong turn and ended up there by accident. A few people noticed her as she walked in. One man nudged his friend and tilted his head toward her. They whispered something and chuckled quietly. Another man glanced at her boots and shook his head. Someone finally asked her, "Are you here to watch, sweetheart?" Maria smiled politely. "No," she said, placing her case on a table. "I'm here to shoot." There was a pause. The man raised his eyebrows. "Well then," he said slowly, like he didn't quite believe her. "Good luck." As she opened her case, a few more people looked over. Her rifle didn't look special, no bright colors or custom grips, but it was clean and well maintained. She handled it carefully, like it meant something more to her than just a tool for sport. Maria took her time. She checked her sights, made a few quiet adjustments, and loaded her gear with a calm focus. Around her, the other competitors were starting warm-ups. One man was showing off his shooting stance, drawing laughs from a small group. Another was talking loudly about how he had won last year's event with a perfect round. No one paid much attention to Maria. In fact, some of them seemed amused that she was even there. A few younger participants were pointing toward her from a distance and laughing. It didn't bother her. She had heard worse, and from people who mattered more. She stood quietly, eyes on the target range. The long stretch of grass and numbered targets didn't scare her. She had seen longer distances, harder angles, tricker winds, but none of those were in front of judges. None had crowds watching. None had a scoreboard lighting up after each shot. That part was new, but Maria had prepared for this in her own way. For years she had practiced behind her grandfather's barn, in a quiet field surrounded by trees and hills. Her grandfather, a calm and patient man, had taught her everything he knew. He never raised his voice, never pushed her. He just showed her, slowly, carefully, with love. He used to say, "Don't aim to impress people. Aim to be better than you were yesterday." And Maria had taken those words to heart. While other kids played video games or went to parties, Maria was out, in the field, lying in the grass, steadying her breath and learning how to listen to the wind. She practiced in rain and sun, in early mornings and late evenings. No audience, no prizes, just her, the target, and a deep desire to master her skill. That's why, when people laughed at her today, it didn't shake her. She wasn't here to be liked. She wasn't here for attention. She was here because it was time. Time to step out of the shadows. Time to show what quiet work can do. Time to stand where she belonged, even if no one else believed it yet. A bell rang, signaling the start of the registration check. Maria moved to the front and gave her name. The event staff gave her a number tag and pointed her toward her lane. As she walked there, one of the staff members looked at her and said kindly, "First time?" Maria nodded. "Well," he said with a friendly smile, "don't let them get in your head. Just do your thing." "Thank you," she replied, grateful for even one kind voice in the crowd. She reached her spot and began setting up her station. Her hands moved smoothly, confidently. A few shooters glanced over, still unsure what to make of her. From behind, she heard someone whisper, "She won't last past the first round." Another replied, "She looks like she borrowed that gear from a thrift store." Maria heard every word, but she didn't flinch, didn't turn, didn't react. She simply adjusted her scope, steadied her breath, and looked down the range. In her mind, she wasn't standing in a crowd of strangers. She was back in the field behind the barn. She could almost hear her grandfather's voice saying, "Focus on the target, not the noise." As the sun rose higher and the final names were called, Maria stood ready. People still looked at her with doubt, with amusement. But that was okay. They hadn't seen her years of quiet work. They hadn't seen her practice in the cold morning air. They didn't know the discipline it took to shoot without a coach, without praise, without competition, but they would know soon. Maria didn't need their approval. She had something stronger: preparation, focus, and a calm fire that no laughter could put out. And as the first shot time drew near, she stood, taller, breathing slowly, ready for whatever would come next. Maria Thompson wasn't just another woman with a rifle. She had a story that most people at the shooting range didn't know. If they had known, maybe they wouldn't have laughed. Maybe they would have watched her more closely. Maybe they would have understood why she stood there so calm, while others were busy showing off. Maria grew up far from cities, in a quiet part of Texas where the roads were mostly dirt and the neighbors lived a mile apart. Her childhood home was a small wooden house with a tin roof and a front porch that creaked when you walked on it. There was no cable TV, and phone signals came and went like the wind. But Maria never complained. She had the sky, the trees, and her grandfather, and to her that was enough. Her parents had passed away when she was only 8 years old. After that, her grandfather, Tom Thompson, took care of her. He was a quiet man, tall and strong, with deep lines on his face and kind eyes. He had served in the military many years ago, but he never talked much about it. What he did talk about was patience, respect, and doing things the right way. Every evening after dinner, Tom would sit on the porch, watching the sunset with a cup of coffee. Maria would sit beside him, her legs swinging off the edge, waiting for him to speak. One evening when she was about 11, he looked at her and said, "You want to learn how to shoot?" Maria had never thought about it before, but she trusted her grandfather more than anyone in the world. So she nodded. Yes. That weekend he brought out an old rifle from a locked chest in the attic. It was dusty, but still in good condition. He taught her how to clean it, how to hold it, how to load it carefully. But before she ever got to fire a single shot, he made her spend days just holding it steady, learning the weight, the balance, and the responsibility that came with it. "You don't shoot to show off," he told her. "You shoot to learn. You shoot to grow. You shoot with respect." Maria listened to every word. Soon he built a simple target range behind the barn. It wasn't fancy, just some stacked hay bales and a few paper targets, but it became her favorite place. It was where she felt focused, free, and fully herself. Every morning before school and every weekend afternoon she practiced. She learned to breathe slowly, to stay calm, to trust herself even when she missed. Sometimes her friends from school would ask what she did for fun. She would just smile and say, "I spend time with my grandpa." She didn't tell them about the range. It was her private world, shared only with the man who believed in her long before she believed in herself. Over the years, Maria got better and better. Her aim improved, her timing sharpened, and her confidence grew. But she never joined a club or entered a competition. She didn't have the money for fancy gear, and her grandfather wasn't the type to chase trophies. He'd say, "The best ones aren't always the loudest ones." Still, as Maria grew older, a small dream started forming inside her. She wanted to know how her quiet skills measured up in the real world. Could someone like her, trained in a backyard without coaches or expensive tools, stand on the same ground as professional shooters? She never told anyone about that dream, not even her grandfather, but she held it close like a small light inside her heart. Then one summer things changed. Her best friend Lily, who had recently moved to a nearby town, came to visit. The two had been close since childhood. They talked about everything: school, family, the future. One afternoon, Maria finally showed her the range behind the barn. Lily was amazed. "You're really good," she said after watching Maria shoot with perfect accuracy. Maria shrugged. "It's just something I do. I've never really tested myself anywhere else." Lily's eyes lit up. "You should." "Why haven't you?" Maria smiled, a little embarrassed. "I wouldn't even know where to start." A few weeks later, Maria got a letter in the mail. It was an invitation to a regional shooting competition. At first she thought it was a mistake, but then she saw the note inside. It was from Lily. "You always say you don't need to prove anything, but I think it's okay to let the world see what I already know. That you're incredible. So, I signed you up. You don't have to go, but if you do, I'll be there cheering." Maria sat with the letter in her hands for a long time. At first, she was unsure. She didn't have the right clothes or a fancy rifle. She didn't know anyone in the competition. But deep down, she also felt something else. A quiet nudge. Her grandfather noticed she was more thoughtful that evening. "What's on your mind?" he asked, sipping his coffee. She handed him the letter. He read it carefully, then looked at her with a proud smile. "You've got nothing to prove to anyone," he said softly. "But if you want to go, go. I believe in you." That was all she needed. Maria spent the next few weeks getting ready. She cleaned her rifle until it shined. She practiced even more than before. She didn't tell many people. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to go, try her best, and see where she stood. And so, when she arrived at the competition that early morning, quiet, unnoticed, and alone, she carried more than just a rifle. She carried years of practice, a promise to herself, and the quiet strength of her grandfather's words echoing in her heart. The day of the competition had arrived, and Maria Thompson found herself standing at the edge of the shooting range, surrounded by faces she had never seen before. The morning sun shone brightly, casting long shadows over the rows of targets lined up across the field. The air was filled with a mix of excitement, nerves, and quiet conversations among the competitors. Maria felt calm inside, but outside, the crowd was lively. Most people were dressed in professional shooting gear, bright jackets, hats with logos, and polished boots. Their rifles looked expensive, their equipment shiny and new. They moved with confidence, speaking loudly, sharing stories of past wins and records they had broken. Maria's old rifle case, scuffed and worn, lay on the table in front of her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This was her first real competition, the moment she had both dreamed of and feared. She thought of her grandfather, his steady voice, and the lessons he had taught her over the years. She remembered his advice. Focus on the target, not the noise. The shooting range officials called out names, and the competitors took their places. Maria's name was among the last to be called. When she heard it, some heads turned, some people raised their eyebrows, and a few whispered to one another. "Who's the new girl?" one man asked, looking at Maria with a slight smile. "She looks like she's never held a rifle in a competition before," another said, shaking his head. Maria heard the whispers, but didn't let them bother her. She had come too far to be distracted by doubts or jokes. As she walked toward her lane, she noticed the reigning champion, Wade Collins, preparing his equipment a few lanes away. Wade was well known in the shooting community, a man with years of experience, many trophies, and sponsors who supported him. He was tall, confident, and carried himself like a winner. Wade glanced at Maria and gave a polite nod. "Good luck," he said, though his eyes held a hint of doubt. Maria nodded back, her voice steady. "Thank you." The crowd was buzzing now. Some people were watching Maria closely, curious to see what she would do. Others were still whispering and laughing quietly, expecting her to fail. Before the first round began, a man near Maria's lane leaned over and said, "This is a tough crowd. You sure you want to do this?" Maria smiled gently. "I'm ready." The competition started with the sound of the judge's whistle. Shooters took their positions and focused on their targets. The silence was thick, broken only by the soft clicks of rifles being prepared and the occasional murmur from the crowd. Maria adjusted her stance, just as she had practiced so many times before. She steadied her breathing, took a slow, deep breath, and fixed her eyes on the target ahead. The wind was calm, and the light was perfect. She raised her rifle, aligned her sight carefully, and fired. The sound was clear and sharp. The bullet hit the target dead center. For a moment, there was silence. Then a few people near her lane gasped quietly. The scoreboard lit up, showing the score of her shot. Perfect. Whispers turned to murmurs of surprise. People looked at each other, unsure if they had seen correctly. The man who had doubted her earlier frowned and leaned in for a better look. Maria didn't smile or celebrate. She lowered her rifle and prepared for the next shot. She knew this was only the beginning. The next two shots were just as steady, just as perfect. Each time the scoreboard updated, the crowd's surprise grew. The whispers turned into conversations. "That's the new girl?" someone said in disbelief. "She's better than I thought. Where did she learn to shoot like that?" another asked. Wade Collins was watching closely now. His polite smile was gone, replaced by a serious expression. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a worthy competitor. As the first round ended, Maria's name was at the top of the scoreboard. She had set a new record for the best score in a first round, something no one had expected. During the break, Maria stayed calm, focusing on her practice routine. Other competitors approached her, some with smiles, others with cautious respect. One man who had been one of the loudest skeptics came over and said quietly, "I guess I was wrong. You've got real talent." Maria nodded. "Thank you." She didn't say much more. Her focus was on the next round. When the second round began, the pressure increased. The crowd was larger now, with more spectators arriving to watch the competition unfold. Cameras clicked and some people took videos on their phones. Maria felt the weight of the attention but didn't let it affect her. She had learned to block out distractions, to trust her skill, and to stay present. She fired shot after shot with steady hands and a calm heart. Each time the scoreboard showed perfect or near-perfect scores, the crowd grew quieter, more respectful. Wade Collins was now standing near her lane, watching every move carefully. He occasionally whispered instructions to himself as if trying to figure out what made Maria so good. At one point after Maria's sixth shot, Wade approached her quietly. "You're doing great," he said. "What's your secret?" Maria smiled softly. "No secret, just practice." Wade laughed. "That's the best answer I could get." The competition continued through the afternoon, with Maria maintaining her top position. The people who had laughed at her earlier were now among her biggest fans. They cheered quietly when she scored well and clapped politely after each round. Maria noticed the change but didn't let it distract her. She kept her focus on the targets and the rhythm she had found long ago behind the barn. As the final round approached, the crowd was on edge. The tension was high, and everyone wondered if Maria could keep her lead. She took a deep breath, steadied her rifle, and fired her last shots with quiet confidence. When the judge announced the final scores, Maria's name was at the very top. She had not only beaten the reigning champion, but had also set a new competition record. The crowd erupted into applause. People stood up and clapped, many cheering her name. The man who had doubted her early on came forward, offering a handshake. Wade Collins smiled and shook her hand too. "You earned it," he said sincerely. Maria smiled back, feeling a mix of pride and humility. She had come a long way from the quiet fields behind her grandfather's barn. She had proven to herself and others that with patience, hard work, and belief, even the quietest voice can be heard loudly. As she packed up her gear, Maria knew this was only the beginning. The shooting range was no longer just a hidden place of practice. It was where her story truly started. After the competition ended, Maria found herself surrounded by people she had never expected to meet. Reporters from local newspapers and small television stations gathered around her, microphones pointed in her direction, eager to hear her story. Flashbulbs popped as they took pictures, capturing the moment when a quiet woman from a small town had surprised everyone. Maria felt a little overwhelmed but stayed composed. She answered their questions simply and honestly. "I just practiced. A lot. I had good teachers," she said, thinking of her grandfather. She didn't want to boast or sound like she was showing off. For her, it was about more than winning. Word spread quickly through the shooting community. Social media pages shared videos of her perfect shots. Comments poured in, some from people who had doubted her at the beginning, now apologizing and praising her skills. Others were inspired by her story, especially the fact that she had trained quietly, without fancy equipment or coaching. Wade Collins, the champion she had beaten, became one of her biggest supporters. At the awards ceremony, he stood beside her as she accepted the trophy. "Maria's talent is real," he told the crowd. "She worked hard and earned every bit of this. We're lucky to have her in our sport." Maria smiled at Wade's words. She respected him, not just because he was a great shooter, but because he showed sportsmanship and kindness. She realized that in this competition it wasn't just about skill. It was about respect, community, and shared passion. That evening, after the event ended and the crowd had dispersed, Maria sat quietly in the hotel lobby. She called her grandfather, on the phone, wanting to share the news with the person who had supported her from the very beginning. "Grandpa," she said, her voice soft but full of joy. "I did it. I won." There was a pause on the other end. Then her grandfather laughed gently. "I knew you could. I never doubted you." Maria felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you. Remember," he said, "this is just the start. Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep being true to yourself." Maria promised she would. She hung up, feeling grateful and excited for what was to come. Back home, her story became an inspiration. Local schools invited her to speak to students about dedication and following dreams. Shooting clubs asked her to teach new members. Even people who had never touched a rifle wanted to meet the woman who had surprised an entire sport. But Maria stayed humble. She kept practicing every day, just as she had done for years. Winning was wonderful, but it was the love of shooting, the peace she found behind the sights, that mattered most. Her grandfather watched proudly from a distance, knowing his granddaughter had stepped into a new chapter of her life. He smiled, thinking about how far she had come, from the quiet field behind the barn to the center of the shooting world. Maria knew challenges lay ahead. There would be tougher competitions, higher expectations, and new skills to master. But she was ready. She had learned that success wasn't about the applause or the trophies. It was about the journey, the patience, and the quiet strength inside. And with that thought, Maria looked forward to the future, confident and calm, just as she had always been. After her big win, Maria Thompson's life changed in ways she had never imagined. People started recognizing her wherever she went. At the grocery store, the bank, and even at the small cafe near her home, strangers would smile and say, "You're the shooter who broke the record, right?" It felt strange, but also wonderful. Maria never sought fame, but now she was becoming a quiet symbol of what hard work and belief could achieve. She received letters and messages from young people, especially girls, who told her how her story inspired them. Some said they had never thought about shooting before but now wanted to try. Others said they were learning to believe in themselves because Maria did. Reading these messages warmed her heart more than any trophy ever could. Despite the attention, Maria stayed true to herself. She continued to practice every day, just as she had done for years. Early mornings at the field behind the barn became her special time, a place where she could think and find peace away from the noise. Her grandfather's old words still guided her: shoot with respect, shoot with patience. Soon Maria began traveling to more competitions. Each one was different. Some were bigger, some had tougher opponents. But with every event, she grew stronger, not just as a shooter, but as a person. She learned to handle pressure, to face challenges with calmness, and to never forget where she came from. One summer, she was invited to speak at a national youth sports conference. Standing in front of hundreds of young athletes, Maria shared her journey. She talked about the lonely hours of practice, the doubts she faced, and the moment she decided to step into the competition despite the laughter. Sometimes, she told the crowd, the hardest part is believing in yourself when no one else does. But if you keep going, if you keep practicing quietly and patiently, you'll surprise even yourself. The audience listened closely. Many eyes were shining, with hope and determination. Back home, Maria also started a small shooting club for beginners. She wanted to create a place where people could learn without feeling judged or scared. Her club welcomed everyone, boys and girls, young and old, experienced shooters and complete beginners. She taught them what her grandfather had taught her: respect for the sport, patience in learning, and the importance of quiet focus. Watching her students grow made Maria feel proud. She realized that winning was wonderful, but sharing what she loved was even better. Each new shooter who hit their first perfect shot reminded her of her own journey, the first time she dared to try. Maria's story reached far beyond the shooting range. Local newspapers ran stories about her, and small towns held events to celebrate her achievements. But Maria never let the attention change who she was. She stayed humble, kind, and always ready to help others. Her grandfather, now older and with softer steps, still came to watch her practice when he could. He never said much, but his proud smile spoke volumes. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, he said, "You have become everything I hoped you would be. Not just a great shooter, but a great person." Maria reached over and took his hand. "I couldn't have done it without you, Grandpa." He squeezed her hand gently. "And remember, the journey never ends. Keep your heart steady, and you'll always find your way." Maria knew he was right. There would be new challenges ahead, new goals to reach, and new lessons to learn. But she felt ready for all of it. Her first shot on the competition day was only the beginning, a symbol of quiet strength and careful preparation. She had faced doubt, laughter, and disbelief, and she had answered not with words, but with action. Now Maria's story was about more than a record broken. It was about the power of patience, the importance of believing in yourself, and the beauty of staying true to who you are. As the sun set over the fields where it all began, Maria stood quietly, her rifle by her side, and a calm smile on her face. She was no longer just the woman they laughed at. She was a champion, a teacher, and an inspiration, and her journey had only just begun.